Welcome to the Independent Learner Program's annual Fruits of Our Labor presentations. I'm Dr. Feit, Director of School-Wide Enrichment. For the past 20 years, the Independent Learner Program has provided opportunities for high school students to engage in in-depth, real-world projects that highlight their individual strengths and interests and that are purposeful and meaningful to them. Tonight is the second of 3 evenings of presentations that represent a broad range of fields. I hope you will be inspired by the passion and perspectives that these young people bring to the process of self-discovery and learning. And now I will turn the evening over to our host, Zoe Harrison, who will introduce all of our presenters. Zoe?
Thank you, Dr. Feit. First, I'd like to give a warm welcome to our presenters and our audience at home. I'm so excited to have everyone here share their projects. I am also a member of this community and I've worked on 2 projects, one of which is my own, as well as a project I worked on with the Action Research for Community Change Group, both of which I will share later. However, I'd first like to introduce Alexis Friedman, here to present her project on mental health and well-being. Alexis?
Thank you, Zoe. As she mentioned, my name is Alexis Friedman and I'm a junior. And this year I conducted a social science research project on mental health in our high school student body. Before I begin, I want to make an important distinction between mental health and mental illness. Mental health is the day-to-day well-being of an individual who is able to regulate their emotions on their own. An individual with a mental illness is unable to regulate their emotions without help from healthcare professionals. So again, the focus of my work is geared towards students who need resources to manage mental health, especially when they're in the private setting, such as their home environment. In my experiences thus far as a junior in high school, I've had my fair share of sleepless nights, tears over grades, and stress attacks over upcoming exams. As a student and an athlete, there are periods of time throughout the school year where I essentially have a 10 to 12-hour day. By the time I get home, I'm exhausted and overwhelmed with the amount of work I have in front of me, and oftentimes I feel as though I am powerless against the constant onslaught of homework and extracurricular activities. The clubs and sports that I'm a part of allowed me to broaden my lens through conversing with different friend groups and grades where I saw the same issue of students who are experiencing constant school-related stress. As I realized what an unfortunate standard this is, I wondered if there was anything I could do as a student to alleviate the student body whose mental health is evidently suffering. Having experienced this all firsthand, I felt as though I have a better chance at making an inroad into the student body to encourage self-care, given that the influence is coming from a peer like myself, as opposed to older staff and mentors. I noticed that adults are oftentimes leading the discussions on mental health as they attempt to provide strategy and recommendations. As a current student, I believe that there is a need to bridge the gap between the perceptions of students who are experiencing high school actively and the perceptions of adults and what they think we need. So I wondered, what are the perceptions of Rhinebeck High School students on their mental and physical health? And what is the best way to educate these students about the importance of mental wellness? So I wanted to conduct a social science research project to investigate these issues and collect data that would function as an updated litmus test on the current mental health demographic in our school. My goal is to provide raw insights for school counselors, teachers, and school staff about how students are really feeling. Constructing a survey required me to think about what would be important to find out and what the best ways to ask these questions might be. I felt that I would get the most accurate reflection of a student's perspective with multiple choice and scaled questions that I numbered 1 through 5. The wording in particular of these questions played a key role in avoiding bias and targeting what might be important to students. My survey was also entirely anonymous, so students were free to answer without judgment. Additionally, to allow for accurate representation per grade, I split the survey up, sending it to each grade separately, so it would be easy to identify specific areas of distress, as well as the differences in daily life according to the age group of each cohort. Once I received my data, there were some findings that stood out to me. For example, in the grade 9 survey, 40.7% of students indicated that they were either often or always overwhelmed in school, and 37% of the 9th grade respondents reported that college and future planning are their primary life stressors. Interestingly, 28% of the 10th grade students reported feeling overwhelmed at school, and this percentage jumps to a whopping 51.8% of 11th grade students who reported feeling overwhelmed often or always at school. And in this research, I defined overwhelmed as feelings of intense stress over managing life in school and out of school. So I wondered if these data points were a byproduct of messages that are instilled since 9th grade, possibly starting in freshman orientation, coupled with parents' advice about the importance grades play in the college process and the eventual achievement of post-secondary goals and career aspirations. The full data set covered a wide range of perspectives on students' abilities to employ healthy habits, such as eating properly, getting enough sleep, how much free time they have each week, and I intend to donate this entire survey to the middle and high school counseling department, as well as sharing it with other mental health professionals on the Rhinebeck staff. The most important takeaway is the prevalence of mental health issues in students who are not diagnosed with a mental illness. In every single survey, nearly half of the respondents indicated that their health strategies could use a lot of work, and as a result of this, they are unable to maintain wellness throughout the school year. As a teenager growing up surrounded by a society that is constantly changing, I've noticed a large shift in resource availability for students who are deeply struggling, and it's incredible. I feel such gratitude to be growing up during what seems to be a shift towards the acceptance of people struggling with addiction or mental illness, and which of course should be a central concern. But I also wonder if we have slightly neglected the students who undergo periods of anxiety or depression that are situationally induced by school. For these types of students, they should not be using the same resources that are directed towards those with the diagnosed mental illness, and I believe there's a very important distinction between mental illness and mental health that should be treated somewhat separately in the sphere of school-related stress. Through my research, I'm working on reinventing the way information is presented to make simple self-care changes more mainstream and accessible. I'm currently writing a research report on the data that I collected in my survey, and once I'm finished, I will be sharing it with school counselors and teaching staff. Along with this report, I'm in the process of writing recommendations to the school based on my findings that provide cohesive solutions to the students who are struggling. Once I have completed this report, I plan on having additional conversations about how the recommendations I offered can be best implemented into our high school. And before I end this presentation, I want to acknowledge the school's efforts thus far in alleviating mental health struggles, because our school is in fact taking steps towards promoting healthier lifestyles among students. For example, next year, a lunch period will be required to ensure that students with overpacked schedules are still allowed to eat. And additionally, Ms. Crivero, our new school social worker, introduced Wellness Wednesdays that function as a quick break during homeroom where students can focus on something other than school. These are all steps in the right direction, and I hope to be a strong student voice for continuing to meet the mental health needs of our student body in the future. Thank you for listening. And I'll hand it back to Zoe.
Thank you, Alexis. I'd like to applaud you for all the wonderful work that you have done, and I look forward to hearing more about it in the future. I'm now excited to introduce Jeremy Thanet, who will be discussing computer science. Jeremy?
Thank you, Zoe. My name is Jeremy. I'm a junior, sorry. This is my second year working with ILP. And this year I shifted it towards 3D modeling. Now, what is 3D modeling? 3D modeling is essentially creating, modeling, sculpting any form of shape on a computer, which can be used in most graphical areas. It's useful in video games, movies, architecture, engineering, simulations, commercial and advertising. So it has a lot of potential, but I mostly wanted to do this as a personal project for a few fun ideas I had. Now, I heard of 3D modeling back in middle school, and after a quick search up, I found Blender, which is usually the go-to free tool to get started in 3D modeling. And well, back in middle school, I thought I could get into Blender and learn to use it. No, Blender is not that simple. And I essentially stopped using it, and I never got to where I wanted to. So I really wanted this year to make amends a bit for my middle school tries. Now, Blender is a open source website. It's an open source tool. It's made back in 1995, and ever since then, they've been just piling on features. The wealth of tools is just ludicrous. There's modeling, sculpting, animating, reflection, simulations. It's so much that it's a bit difficult to know where to start. Usually the way I got into Blender is you look it up online, it essentially downloads itself on your computer, and then you're left with an open space and a big cube. You have a toolbar on the left, you have a toolbar on the right, a timeline, a few tabs, but where do you go from there? That was the idea of the project. And where I went from there is I'm going to try some stuff out. Because of the amount of features Blender has, and because of the lack of intuitiveness, it's not necessarily a great idea what I did. So I'm here to say to anyone who's upcoming, maybe start up with a bit of research. But it was a lot of fun. Blender it's not one tool. It's essentially a combination of a lot of stuff. And this project was finding what I like to do out of it and what I want to make. So I ended up researching, looking. I've watched tutorials from what other people would do, and then I replicated that. And then the idea was to come up with my own ideas and do my own. The end goal this year was to make a space shuttle. I found blueprints for a space shuttle, and I wanted to model it, which I did get to. the reason I mentioned that Blender had a lot of tools added on top of each other is that every time they add something new, they make it a bit easier to use. But that still, since those features were not the firstly intended, they're not intuitive. They're hidden behind a bunch of menus. And if you're a professional, that's great. Professionals use Blender or other tools, and it's very useful. But for a newcomer like myself, it's not good. It's not useful, and it's very difficult to find what you want because you need to know exactly what you're looking for, and sometimes that's not the case. This project was messing around, finding out what I like, and then pushing what I like. What I found is that I tried modeling, animating, sculpting, and a bit of texture painting. My favorite by far was modeling. I mentioned the space shuttle. I had a lot of fun, and it seemed quicker to learn how to make these shapes and make them come to life. It's really a form of almost computer art, and I'd recommend anyone tries it because it has so much potential in the professional realm, and it can be a lot of fun as a at-home project. Really, last year's project I did programming, and what I'd like to say about Blender, or 3D modeling in general for that matter, is that it does not require that kind of logical thinking. And if you're making something out of your own imaginations, all they really need is that creativity for that first idea. And then from there on, it's where you want to take it. It's any form of experience. Rhineck actually offers a 3D modeling elective, which I have taken and which is a lot of fun. And if this inspires anyone, I'd offer for anyone to try, because it really does have a big potential. That there's so many job opportunities and so much fun to have at home because it is so different. It's a very different style. If you look at the end of an animated movie, look at the credits. There's just so many people who are employed there, and I don't know. I imagine it's a blast to be working there. So, thank you.
That was really impressive, Jeremy. Our next speaker will be Charlotte Geary, here to discuss art therapy and creativity.
Thank you, Zoe. Hi, my name is Charlotte Geary, and I'm a freshman, and I did my project on art therapy and the study of human creativity. What I learned during ILP, and I hope you learned from my presentation, is that psychology is an important study that is constantly changing and can help shape how we view our world and ourselves, and also that art therapy is an important form of therapy that can help bridge the connection between words and feelings. So as a child growing up, I've always loved art. When I started working with Dr. Feit, I wanted to do something more about the medical field and something more medically oriented. At first, I had not planned to do something with any relation to art. However, later on in the year, I started researching psychology and therapy in its different forms. I ended up finding art therapy, and that's how I came about in choosing my ALP project. I ended up choosing the question, what is art therapy? What is it used for? And how does creativity and age affect this? So the history of art therapy. The formal practice of art therapy has its origins in mid-20th century Europe, the term being attributed to British artist Adrian Hill, 1942. At a time where many suffered from tuberculosis, it was observed that drawing and painting was a creative outlet for patients that provided them freedom their confines did not. Later in the 1900s and around the 1960s, art therapy spread to mental hospitals and institutions, and Dr. Edward Adamson studied and observed the connection between artistic expression and emotional release. Art therapy also was, and still is, largely used for children, as it was discovered to prove quite useful in expressing feelings despite underdeveloped or limited vocabulary at a young age. So here are just some experts that helped me during my ILP project and some classes that I took. So while studying art therapy, I interviewed local artists such as Arta Kajij. She is EMDR trained, which stands for eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing, and it is a type of psychotherapy that enables people to heal from symptoms and emotional distress like trauma. She specializes in group therapy and psychotherapy with children. I reached out to her after finding an email, and I asked if we could meet. She ended up agreeing, and we scheduled a Zoom call. Prior to the Zoom call, I prepped questions asking her about her practice, how it worked, and different clients. And during the call, she gave me perspective on it. I also ended up taking a neuroscience class at Burke Neurological Institute for high school students. Burke is a rehab center for clinical treatments that repair the brain and spinal cord located in White Plains. In this class, there were various instructors who talked about the different sectors of neuroscience. one of which was neuropsychology that discussed how injuries or illness of the brain affects behavioral functions. I found this incredibly interesting because there's a discussion of neuroplasticity, which is how people's minds change based on experience or the lack of it, and how everyone's brain is so different. The main teachers of this course were Dr. Diana Willis and Dr. Vibhu Sahini, who both work at Burke Neurological Institute. So what I did and why. Throughout ILP, I've studied psychology, and I found a particular interest in behavioral psychology, which is the study of behavior in different environments. I also continuously studied art therapy. I ended up choosing psychology during ILP because I wanted to improve my understanding of what goes on in so many people's lives and everyday choices that shape our world. I chose art therapy because of the combination of both the arts and therapy being the medical aspect, and I find that just incredibly fascinating. I chose to narrow it down general art therapy to mainly just children and children's psychology because that's what fascinates me particularly. So what I want to do next, throughout the rest of the year during ILP, I plan to study art therapy for different mental illnesses such as depression, bipolar disorder, and substance abuse. I also plan to study art therapy and its different effects on different ages, especially young children. I want to explore the study of creativity in young children, kind of stepping away from art therapy, and things related to this, such as the Torrance test for verbal and physical creativity, which assesses how creatively a child's mind works. So what do I see in the future? In the future, I want to go into the field of psychology. I do not think, per se, I want to become an art therapist, but this project has informed me of all the different fields of psychology I could potentially go into later on. I think I may want to go into engineering psychology, which uses psychology to investigate how people interact with machines and other technology. They basically analyze how the human mind and behavior works to help design and improve technology, consumer products, and even living environments. I think the increasing use of technology in our world and everyday lives would make this job very interesting. And to conclude, overall, I really enjoyed this project, and I'm so fortunate to have worked with Dr. Feit this year.
Thank you, Charlotte. I can't wait to see how your project develops in the future. Next, I'd like to introduce Erin Drescher, who will talk about gender disparities in cardiac care.
Thank you, Zoe. Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Drescher. This is my third year in ILP with Dr. Feit. I believe that everyone deserves excellent cardiac care. And my question was, how can we minimize gender disparities in cardiac care? Well documented in that women and people of color are underserved. 4 years ago, my mom and I were going to visit my grandparents, and we saw an ambulance outside of their apartment. At first, we didn't think there was a problem because there are many people that live in the apartment complex. However, as we got closer, we saw my uncle just outside of the ambulance. We asked him about what had happened and later found out that my grandfather was having a heart attack. He was not breathing properly, had chest and arm pain, and felt extremely dizzy. After he was taken to the hospital, he had angioplasty surgery and was diagnosed with coronary artery disease. Following this traumatic event, I became interested in interventional cardiology. And for those of you who are wondering, an interventional cardiologist is one who receives about 1 to 2 years of additional training and treats cardiovascular disease as well as other structural heart conditions through catheter-based procedures. This means that there's no open heart surgery being done, but procedures like heart valve replacement that reduce the amount of damage to the heart. So flashback to sophomore year, I turned 16 years old, and this was the minimum age requirement for entering a lab and working with a mentor. But because of COVID, that wasn't possible. Therefore, I turned my attention to public health, and I started to explore gender disparities in cardiovascular treatment between men and women. After reading a variety of articles that describe these gender-based inequities, I discovered that few were trying to actually tackle this bias. Only 22 out of 30,000 studies were healthcare-based, and this was truly devastating. Did you know that women, in fact, have a higher frequency of having a heart attack than men, even though no physical differences exist between the two? Study after study, healthcare providers claimed that they had reduced this gap, but after reading surveys and conducting research, women continue to be treated unfairly. A 2018 study found that doctors often view men with chronic pain as brave or heroic, but women that are experiencing the same pain are often thought to be emotional or hysterical. Therefore, doctors are more likely to treat a woman's pain as a product of a mental health condition, although this may not be so. In that same study, a few years later, healthcare professionals ultimately discovered that, or believed that, women actually exaggerate their pain. And ironically, 40% of the staff surveyed were women. So following this research, I felt the need to explore these gender biases and actually contacted Dr. Julia Tartaglia, the co-founder of the Scientista Foundation. This is the largest science foundation in the US that aims to build a network of women in the science field. Actually, Dr. Tartaglia was a Rhinebeck graduate who attended Harvard University. While still in high school, like me, she was enrolled in the Independent Learners Program, where she realized that scientific journals were mostly being written by men. Then in college, she wondered why some of the women in her Harvard cohort who wanted to go into science careers dropped out. I am proud to say that next year, Dr. Tartaglia has invited me to become the first leader of a high school chapter of Scientista. Therefore, throughout this journey, I realized that not only were women receiving unfair treatment, which was quite surprising, but the likelihood of them being successful in their science career was very slim. I have reached out to Dr. Tartaglia, and we are currently working on establishing this chapter. If there's anything that I've taken from my ILP journey, it's that you certainly don't have to wait to become involved. I'm a current member of HOSA, and for those of you that don't know, that's Health Occupation Students of America. This is a global student-led organization where students like myself engage in competitions after studying specific healthcare topics. HOSA's mission is to promote career opportunities in the healthcare industry and to enhance the delivery of quality healthcare to all people. Furthermore, over this summer, I'm participating in a 2-week doctor shadowing program at Stanford University. I not only will gain this hands-on experience that I've been longing for, but will be exposed to this new healthcare environment, and I'll really be able to see if this is what I'd like to pursue in the future. Now, some people have asked me, aren't you afraid to be in a field where so many patients die? Aren't you even afraid to just, handle blood? And I am certainly apprehensive. However, I do realize that this is a huge responsibility because you're ultimately taking the lives of others in your own hands. However, I believe that everyone deserves excellent cardiac care and this special opportunity to pursue a career in this field. Thank you.
That was really interesting and eye-opening. Thank you, Erin. I'd now like to introduce Ella Grant, who will be discussing her path to becoming a scientific children's author. Ella?
Thank you, Zoe. Hi, I'm Ella Grant, and as Zoe mentioned, I'm a 9th grade student, and I decided to write a children's book on science. So before I talk about the book that I started writing, I first want to just mention my background in science. So science is a huge part of me and who I am. And from a young age, I always had an immense trust in science because it helped explain how the world works to a young kid like me, and it continues to today. So to further this knowledge and understand science more, I conducted many science experiments studying ocean acidification and climate change. And in fact, in 7th grade, I placed as one of the top 300 middle school scientists in the country. And I also more recently had studied neurology and Alzheimer's disease. And I additionally entered a challenge where I created a YouTube video on geoengineering to communicate science. And I noticed, looking back at all that I had done with science, that from creating volcanoes in 1st grade to now where I'm currently studying algae, that as I grew, my love of science and my knowledge of science grew along with me. And with this newfound knowledge, I also discovered a lack of public trust in science. And this became very apparent to me during the COVID-19 pandemic, where there was a lack of unity surrounding mask mandates and vaccinations, and there still is today. So I decided to answer the question, how can I communicate science in a meaningful way? So looking at this big question, I first decided to narrow it down to an age group. And I decided on first grade, which was the age that I got interested in science. And in fact, first grade, which is around age 7, that age is considered the age of reason because it's an age where students cement their observations and further wonder and ask questions. So I thought this would be the perfect age to target a question of science communication towards. And then I also decided, well, how am I going to communicate science? So I thought that the best way to do this would be through a children's book on science because I love to read as a kid and I know many other students do. So like a scientist, I decided to go about this book with a set of research and a set of data. So for my research, I read many scientific curriculums for first grade students and scientific children's books. And then I started to shift towards conducting data. And I actually interviewed 3 first grade students, my young research team, and I asked them questions about what they wondered and what they thought about the world to basically see, well, how does a first grader view life? And interestingly enough, it was different than the way I viewed science and how many of I know my friends do too. So I asked them various questions about what they wondered, and some of their answers consisted of, well, what's the science behind slime? And that question was pretty fascinating to me. And also another student asked if dinosaurs ate the unicorns, and that's why they weren't around anymore. And I found this question quite funny, and I didn't have the heart to break it to this girl about the unicorns part. But this answer actually does show the formation of a hypothesis because she was balancing theories and reality, fiction and reality. And it shows one of the earliest stages of science, which is developing theories. So trying to piece together these various answers, I started to move towards the stage of actually writing the book. And that's the stage I'm currently in. And I wanted to pick a topic for it. So knowing that scientific trust is often lost or not built with to begin with, I decided that my book should be on the scientific method and communicate the idea that science is always changing as our information improves. And science is only actually working if it changes. And that concept, although sounds simple, is often misunderstood. And I also wanted to go about this book in an interesting way. So I decided to target the book towards getting kids to use their surroundings. Because as I interviewed the students, I noticed that observations shaped what they wondered and shaped their questions. For example, one boy who I interviewed was making a paper airplane as we talked, and he asked questions only about flight and engineering. And another girl who I interviewed by her window asked questions only about trees and flowers and things she could see outside. So I knew that observations would also play a critical role in me successfully communicating science to them. So in the future, what I want to do once I write this book, well, I want to have a QR code at the end of the book that has that leads to my own website with further scientific resources and YouTube videos, some created by me and some created by others, on further scientific topics. So it communicates the idea that students should never stop learning, as science never stops changing. And of course, I want to finish and publish this book. However, this is not the main goal of my book. Although all these milestones are important, the main goal of my book is to build a trust in science at a young age. So going back to that big overwhelming question of how can I communicate science in a meaningful way? Well, by teaching kids that science is always changing. Thank you.
Well, Ella, I certainly look forward to seeing the finished product. I would now like to introduce Charlotte Lipman and her project detailing the advances in the women's movement.
Thank you, Zoe. My name is Charlotte Lipman, and I'm a sophomore. This year in ILP, I wanted to further educate myself on women's rights. Through my research and many discussions, I learned that women are being failed in almost all aspects of life, but specifically in corporate America. For my presentation, I wanted to share my findings in order to educate others and raise awareness for the women's rights movement. I had seen things on various social media sites about unfair behavior towards women all around the world, specifically in America. I, however, did not think that simply reading things online that could be wrong or miscommunicated was enough. I thought that in order to properly educate myself on this specific issue and possibly be able to educate others, I had to go out and do it myself. I thankfully was able to do this through ILP, a place where I felt free to discuss my research and accurately educate myself. I'm interested in this topic because I think it will shape both my future and countless others after me. The fact that women are underdogs in the workplace infuriates me, and from what I have read, also angers many others. This can be shown in a Pew Research Center analysis, where it was proven that women's median hourly earnings in 2020 were still only 84% of what men earned for the same job. That is a full 16% less. This figure has been stable for over 15 years. The first step in my project was finding who and what I wanted to study. And in order to do this, I read the book Secrets of a Powerful Woman, which was filled with information from many insightful and influential women. From there, I found Martha Burke, the former chair of the National Council Women's Organization, who wrote an amazing book on her many battles for gender equality. She is most famous for challenging the Augusta National Golf Club for gender discrimination and not allowing women into the club. After reading Mrs. Burke's book, I had questions about both the book and her life. I was able to find her phone number through her website, and before calling her, formulated a list of questions that I had. Then, one day in Dr. Fite's office, I called her not knowing whether or not I would get an answer. Thankfully, Martha Burke answered the phone, and I was able to get answers for my questions. From hearing countless other reports, I learned things that I never thought would have happened. Even as early as in the Bible, followers are told that a woman is inferior to a man. Things are said such as a woman are to remain quiet, wives should submit to their husbands, and that a husband is the head and owner of their wife. This list goes on and on. In more present-day times, people can see toy computers that are specifically designed for girls, with less memory space and capabilities than one traditionally made for a boy. We also see girls given toys like doll houses, baby dolls, vacuum cleaners, and toy kitchens that they are meant to maintain and take care of, which allows them to grow up thinking that this is what they are meant to do: stay home, clean their houses, and take care of their children. While little girls are given chores to occupy their time, boys are given fireman and doctor kits, building toys, trucks, and computers, all career-oriented toys. This clearly demonstrates the job separation forced between genders since early childhood. According to research published in the journal Frontiers in Psychology in 2018, girls and boys follow the example of their parents, which further explains why society is in an ongoing cycle of gender discrimination. When girls see their mothers at home taking care of a younger sibling or making dinner, that they feel that one day this will be their responsibility. Martha Burke's book, The Cult of Power, and many other articles confirm that when girls see their mothers working out of the house in jobs dominated by both men and women, they feel that they could do the same and receive the same opportunities. If women were to be given the same openings, their children would see this and therefore think more highly of themselves and what they will be able to accomplish in their later life. However, due to the glass ceiling, the point at which a woman can no longer be promoted and go higher in their career, this is almost impossible. The glass ceiling is due to the belief that women will leave their job in order to have children and further take care of them, something that men hardly do. When talking to Mrs. Burke, she told me that the three main reasons for the barrier still existing include the little to no childcare provided to workers, institutional sexism, and the fact that women still have the extra burden of taking care of children and homes, one that most men do not have. With this, I hope that my generation is able to break down this barrier and make a change in order to ensure a better future for both ourselves and many after us. Thankfully, as Martha Burke said to me, many improvements have been made in the fight for women's rights that have led to a happier work life for women all over the world. However, this fight is far from over and will need additional support until women have equal rights all over the world. In the future, I hope to make a big impact in order to help women in all walks of life, not just at the corporate level. Thank you.
That was really interesting, Charlotte. Let's move on to Jocelyn Grecious, who will be describing her East Asian studies.
Thank you, Zoe. Hello, my name is Jocelyn Grecious. I am a junior, and this is my third year in the Independent Learner Program. I have a great interest in East Asian studies. It is what I want to pursue in college. It is a field which promotes a broad understanding of East Asia, both the past and present. It includes the study of the region's culture, philosophies, language, history, and politics. I also want to pursue diplomacy in the future. I have an East Asian background and a passion for traveling and learning languages. In 9th grade, I started researching trade agreements between Asian nations and the US and their economic relationships. It kick-started my interests in learning about international relations. This was a very broad topic, so I narrowed my interest to focus on Japan and its trade agreements with the United States. This was especially interesting to me because I was able to read newspapers and articles in both English and Japanese. My mother is Japanese, and I speak with her every day in Japanese, and virtually every summer I've traveled to Japan. I frequently consume Japanese television and media, read books, and listen to music. I also maintain contact with family and friends in Japan. My interest in Japanese culture led me to explore important aspects of other East Asian nations as well. This year, I took a course on contemporary China, which was taught by a variety of professors and diplomats. I learned about Chinese history, politics, and prominent political figures. As a result of taking the course, I gained a deeper understanding of the political progression from Mao Zedong to Xi Jinping, as I wrote an 11-page research paper about their comparative ideologies. My experience with the program intensified my interest in East Asian studies. I got more insight into the politics, economics, and leadership of the Chinese government, which is one of the most powerful entities in the entire world. I enjoyed learning foreign languages, including Korean and Chinese. My journey in learning Mandarin began 4 years ago. I became proficient and was accepted to a selective AP Chinese course, which I currently attend. I have traveled to China and Taiwan and experienced firsthand the environment and culture of these nations. I read Chinese books to challenge myself, and it is an engaging way to learn. My proficiency in Japanese and knowledge of the culture gave me an advantage as they share similar aspects in characters and customs. As for learning Korean, I gained my foundation from a virtual Korean language class. I learned about the language, culture, history, and origins of the language. I formed meaningful relationships with fellow students and enjoyed an environment of shared interest in East Asian language study. We had similar academic interests, which fostered an engaging atmosphere and allowed us to connect better. Studying foreign languages teaches me the importance of determination and effort and not giving up, even in times of difficulty. There is only so much that translations can accomplish, and it is very easy to get lost in translation. I believe that learning foreign languages is necessary to appreciate the nuances of a foreign culture and to be a successful diplomat and negotiator. As part of ILP this year, I hosted Human Rights Today, a panel discussion in which we explored the abuses of artificial intelligence and invasive profiling technologies such as facial recognition software and the use of deepfakes to disseminate misinformation about members of specific racial and ethnic groupings. The panel included a dean of Harvard Law School, a doctor of computer science who develops AI, and a high school educator specializing in math and technology. These are very relevant issues that permeate many aspects of society today. The program was broadcast on the Rhinebeck District's YouTube channel. Just recently, I received the Congressional Award Gold Medal. The award is the highest level offered by the Congressional Award, which is run by Congress. It took me multiple years to accomplish, as I've been working on this since middle school. The award focuses on personal development, athletic development, community service, and completing expeditions and explorations such as travel. I also greatly enjoy community service. Thus far, I've completed more than 400 hours. I have volunteered at libraries and have worked with local environmental conservation organizations and programs that help promote racial equity and awareness. I gain fulfillment from contributing to my community and it reinforces my greater belief in the importance of civil participation and awareness of societal issues that affect us all. This may be the most important lesson that I've learned from my experience in ILP. Thank you.
That was really impressive, Jocelyn. I can't wait to hear more about your project and future accomplishments. Next up, we will be hearing from Katina Boswell about the process of documentary making.
Thank you, Zoe. Hi, everyone. I'm Katina Boswell, and I'm a senior, and I did my project on documentary making. About a month ago, I was bored and decided to look through my old camera. To my surprise, I found footage from a documentary I had made during the first quarantine that started in March of 2020. Being able to look back at this footage was insane in the way that so much had changed in everyone's lives since then. I feel as though many people, including myself, find themselves asking the question, how much did COVID really affect our lives? And to answer that question, and looking back on my own life from the time, I believe that we can all collectively agree that our lives have forever been changed, whether it was in a positive or negative way. Now, all of you may be wondering, what inspired you to make this, or what was your aim? And to be completely honest, as I've grown up, I've always had a passion for making videos, and even looking back at the ones my parents have made when me and my siblings were growing up. As I began middle school, I started to watch YouTube videos such as travel vlogs or Get Ready With Me's. Being able to watch these people express themselves in the way that they wanted to on the internet while also documenting their lives and having fun inspired me to do so myself. When I was in 7th grade, I had started a YouTube channel myself and would film vlogs, which are video blogs. I'd always thought about what my older self would think and what I now would want to see looking back on my childhood, so I knew that this was a type of content that I wanted to make, even if no one other than myself would be seeing it. Fast forward to 2020, I knew that now, during a time like this, it would be interesting to look back on, especially since we had no idea what was going to happen. I would vlog my days and make updates on the statistics at the time. Life during the first quarantine, for me, consisted of a lot of baking, mini walks, online schooling, and I even had my first quarantine birthday. Being able to have the opportunity to look back and see not only mine, but other people's thoughts and perspectives is mind-boggling because of how we thought it was going to be. Throughout my documentary, I said, I don't think or hope anyone in my family is going to get COVID. We have all been taking the right precautions. And I truly believe that this will be over by May of 2020. And that has since been proven wrong. I filmed for the first time on March 25th, 2020. On this day, it had only been over a week since schools and the workplaces were shut down. I had expressed in my documentary that we were still not doing video calls with school, meaning that platforms such as Zoom and Google Meets were not as prevalent as they are today. We also believed that we would be going back to school on March 30th, then April 13th, then May, and at that point, we knew that we would not be coming back anytime soon. One part in this documentary that had completely blown my mind was that on the first day I stated the stats on COVID. As of March 25th, 2020, there were 30,811 total cases and 285 deaths in New York State. Now we have reached 5 million cases, including myself, my 2 sisters, and my dad, and about 37,000 deaths. Looking back on what I had said before about taking all the right precautions, I realized that it did not matter what you did or didn't do, the virus could get anyone. At the time, I would have never thought that now, 2 years later, this would still be happening and how much our lives would be changed because of this virus. My parents are now working from home, and I spend so much more time with them than I had in the past. I've been able to build stronger relationships with my family because of the amount of time we had spent together in quarantine. Also in school, the way that we learned has been changed significantly. Now we are more technology-oriented, and almost none of my classes use paper for assignments anymore, and we are given all of them online. It's also crazy to think that some kids in elementary school have not been able to experience school without a mask or a cohort schedule until recently. Since 2 years ago, we have been able to move forward in small steps trying to decrease and limit the amount of COVID cases. We now have vaccines which have helped significantly only a few months ago we were fully able to go out and live our lives in a somewhat normal way. I've been able to play basketball at school again with a full season, go to basketball games, travel, go out to eat, and more. Although COVID-19 is not fully gone and won't be for a long time, we have improved so much since the initial outbreak. Another way that our lives have changed since is that in the beginning of the first quarantine, so many people were working so hard due to the uncertainty of their future, and almost all of us have become more unproductive, including myself. This was also shown throughout my documentary when I had interviewed my parents specifically. Over the past 2 years, spending most of my time at home, I've been able to get a lot of work done. But there have been month-long stretches where I have lost almost all motivation due to the lack of activity I had going on in my life. Although this happened to me, I still managed to push through with my academics and reach my ultimate goal of completing high school and graduating. Next year, I will be studying at the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University and will be majoring in marketing. I do not think that COVID-19 will truly be gone anytime soon, and it will continue to have long-lasting effects on everyone's lives in many different ways, but I will continue to document my life and the improvements until we can confidently say that we are safe and everyone is able to live the normal life that we had before. But for now, this is our normal. Thank you.
That was really interesting. Thank you, Katrina. I wish you the best in college. As I said earlier, I myself have worked on a project for the program this year, which I am so excited to share with you. When I joined ILP, I wished to discover a passion, which led me to develop the core question, what does it take to discover and develop a passion? To accomplish this, I explored two of my greatest interests, working with children with special needs and editing videos. I began with my first interest, working with children with special needs. I've been curious about this ever since I was in 6th grade, when after I moved to a new school, I met a group of children who seemed different than any other kids my age. I felt as if I had a special connection with them, and soon they became my friends. After leaving that school, I realized that I wanted to not only explore that connection, but also someday use it to help others. As with most projects, I began my process through research, specifically to expand my understanding of the minds of children, both typical and with disabilities. Among the books I read was Piaget's Psychology of the Child. Piaget was the first to understand that children are not just small adults and that their minds are actually different. As a result, he developed his theory of cognitive development, which explains the stages of mental development that children undergo throughout their childhood. His theory has helped build a basic understanding of a child's mind and has allowed people to predict their intellectual development. After conducting my research, I began to reach out to organizations that enable teenagers like me to volunteer within the cause. Finally, after sending out numerous emails, I contacted an organization called the Friendship Foundation, which offers teens like me the opportunity to form one-on-one relationships with disabled teens. The first meeting with my buddy was unsupervised, unlike my 6th grade experience, and I was not prepared for it. Throughout the meeting, he displayed some concerning behaviors that surprised me and made me feel very uncomfortable. The experience led me to realize that it was impossible to be placed in that type of situation without proper training. So I quickly backtracked and began to concentrate on my other interest, video editing. Though I had always had a small interest in editing videos, it grew a lot during the pandemic. As the world shut down, I developed these skills both for my personal enjoyment and to assist my family with tasks they were unable to have a professional complete because of the pandemic. And as I began to cultivate these skills further, I realized that it was something that I not only enjoyed, but was also good at. This year, I got in touch with Dina Schumacher, a producer at LMC Media, Largemont and Mamaroneck's local public access channel. After meeting with her, I began to work as a volunteer editor at the station. To date, I've worked on 3 projects for the channel, including Value Education, Dr. Fight's own show. Working with them has enabled me to learn diverse techniques and elements that have allowed me to further develop my abilities, such as end credits, lower thirds, and more advanced transitions. Both of these experiences have allowed me to understand that developing passions requires commitment and time. Finding these interests was easy, as they had been things I'd wanted to do for years. It takes time, however, to mold them into a project that I can work on for years to come. The pursuit of a passion is an ongoing and challenging process, and both perseverance and commitment are important in order to allow us to stick with an endeavor and achieve what we care most about. Hopefully in the future, I can merge these 2 passions into a career that will allow me to make a difference within my community. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce Lily Mansell, who will be sharing her social science research. Lily?
Thank you, Zoe. My name is Lily Mansell. I am a freshman, and I will be speaking about the extent to which the media impacts students' knowledge of current events. Like many other people, I learned a lot over the past few years during quarantine. I gained a new interest in late night comedy shows, one of them being Saturday Night Live. One of the reasons I think it engaged me so much was that a lot of the skits and jokes were related to current events and the politics and news I hear daily. As I began to figure out my ILP project, I thought about how I could combine my interest in Saturday Night Live with my interest in current events and perhaps learn something from it. This project could help me gain a new perspective on how young adults get their news and how their knowledge and awareness will impact our generation's future. I often think about the significance of our generation being properly educated in media literacy and how to communicate effectively so that in the future we are careful to protect the right that the public has to hearing truthful information. There's a lot of actions to be made in the world, and we will soon have the power to make great changes through the leadership positions we will assume. I take the fact that students' perceptions of truth impact the future and the fact that students are easily influenced by the media's perception of current events into consideration. And I ask two questions. To what extent does the media impact students' knowledge of current events? And how, if at all, might watching Saturday Night Live influence high school students' political awareness and perspectives? For my ILP, I conducted a social science research project that included a literature review, which means reading about the issues of truth in media reporting of news events. There are multiple sources for this, so I narrowed my research to the influence of Saturday Night Live on public perceptions of the news. My interest, however, is in young people. I decided the best way to gather data would be to design a survey. Creating a survey is a lengthy process that involves many edits and revisions, so there will be minimal bias and the possible responses would accurately reflect the questions being asked. When it was approved by Dr. Wilson, I sent out the survey to Rhinebeck High School students in grades 9 through 12, asking questions pertaining to the news sources they watch, what late night comedy shows they watch, and further questions specifically about their own political awareness and perspectives that may be influenced by late night comedy shows. I gathered students can be influenced by Saturday Night Live, but usually will take time to read credible and legitimate news sources and do extra research after hearing a political joke. From the data I've collected, I can say that comedy shows are not the only way students get their news. There are other resources students use to receive information that are either printed or broadcast. 40.7% of students answered CNN as the most used televised news source. 8.5% said Fox News, 5.1% answered MSNBC, 31% said they read the New York Times, and 11.9% said they read the Washington Post. It is respectable that students are reading or watching reliable news sources and adding to their awareness of current events. However, around 40% of students said they frequently question the credibility of their news sources, and only 16% could confidently find their sources credible. 39% of students said they watch Saturday Night Live. However, only 12% said they watch it frequently. Around 50% of students always recognize the jokes that are made on Saturday Night Live, and about 25% of students were in the middle about how many jokes they understood. While the 50% that always understands jokes are a bit low, even understanding some of the jokes proves an awareness of important political events. When asked if they would do extensive research on a joke heard on Saturday Night Live, most students said they would do the extra research to perhaps make sense of what they heard and make sure they are fully educated on the topic. Only 14.5% of students said they would be influenced by a political joke made on a comedy show. To gauge the extent to which students are using the knowledge of current events to connect to personal values, I asked a series of questions about political affiliation and a desire to vote. Around 80% of students think that the right to vote is important to them. This shows that there is hope for our generation to be well educated and limit the sources they trust, while allowing ourselves to further research topics and expand our knowledge of current events. In the future, I hope to share my information with the social studies department so that teachers might use this information to assess students' overall political awareness. I also plan on reaching out to a former comedy writer who may have insight on the thought that goes into writing routines with political jokes, including the credibility of the jokes and maybe how they think the jokes will influence viewers' perspectives of current events. During this process, I learned a lot about the high school student body and how their political knowledge and awareness could be impacted by political comedy. My discoveries gave me confidence that our generation is able to find reputable news sources and gain meaningful knowledge from them. Thank you.
Wow, Lily, that was really impressive. I am so excited to present our final project for my fellow Action Research for Community Change team members. We are presenting all 3 nights, and so we've divided our team over that time. I'd now like to introduce Kyle Ryan and reintroduce both Jocelyn Grecious and myself, Zoe Harrison. Action Research for Community Change is a student-centered social science research think tank based on the book Student Research for Community Change that Dr. Feit co-authored with Dr. William Tobin, a sociologist from the Kenan Institute for Ethics at Duke University. Dr. Feit and Dr. Tobin wrote the book based on 10 years of research that demonstrated that high school students can make a positive impact in their communities by providing local organizations with empirical research that supports policy development.
Rather than have a typical curriculum, Action Research teaches students to apply social science methods to address issues that, when embedded in their communities, are multifaceted and often entangled with the beliefs and needs of community stakeholders. Our recent clients have included the Community Resource Center with a study on access to affordable housing and transportation, the Westchester Joint Waterworks, a study on public perceptions of water quality, and the Village of Mamaroneck, for whom last year we conducted a study on legislative limitations on the use of gas-powered leaf blowers.
To identify issues in our community, we invite leaders of local organizations to speak with us about the challenges they face as public service organizations. In a series of interviews with community leaders, we consider the challenges they share with us and identify an area on which to focus our study. This year, the Action Research students conducted a study for the Village of Mamaroneck's Tree Committee, chaired by Mrs. Beverly Sherrod. We investigated residents' perspectives on sustaining our urban forest and perspectives on new legislation adopted in 2021 regarding the removal, planting, and preservation of trees that support environmental goals in our community.
We interviewed Ms. Sherrod to learn about her experiences as a conservationist who is working to create awareness of the importance of the urban forest as a means to combat air pollution, erosion, and climate change, and protect the beauty of our community. Urban forest was a new term for us. The urban forest refers to trees in built-up areas that provide a means to preserve indigenous and air-purifying trees, particularly old-growth trees. From Ms. Sherrod, we learned that in fall of 2021, the Village Board of Trustees approved legislation that requires homeowners to apply for permits to remove trees from private property. The law restricting removals applies to protected trees only. For example, trees that are 8 inches in diameter and 4.5 feet tall from the ground. These trees require a permit and have a replanting requirement. Removing them without a permit entails a fine. These fines for removing a tree without a permit are substantial and can run into thousands of dollars. After 2 detailed conversations with Ms. Sherrod, she identified resistance from private property owners to the 2021 legislation that clearly articulates how people should manage trees on private property.
Action Research members generated the research question: what are the perspectives of homeowners and renters in the Village of Mamaroneck on the removal and replacement of trees according to the 2021 legislation? We decided on a qualitative study for which we developed a survey to determine the views and attitudes of homeowners regarding the trees in the Village of Mamaroneck that are located on private property. We began by finding what data would be the most beneficial to the tree committee, including residents' demographic information such as age, home ownership, decision-making regarding trees, the presence of children and pets, their past decisions regarding trees on their property, and their current beliefs about the usefulness of trees in our community.
Robert Ingenito, Public Information Officer for the Village, and Mrs. Sherrod reviewed our survey. This resulted in both English and Spanish versions being distributed over a 3-week period in the Village's e-newsletter during March 2022. We garnered 18 responses to the English version of our survey and no responses on the Spanish version. Of those respondents, a full 77.8% reported voting in local elections. According to research on voter turnout in local elections conducted by Portland State University, an average of only 15% of registered voters participate in local elections nationwide. If voter turnout is an indicator of civic engagement, we had heard from civically engaged individuals.
The demographic profile of respondents to our survey showed that they were between the ages of 31 and 66 plus years old, homeowners, which made up 83%, who made decisions about trees on their properties, and roughly half had children and/or pets. We queried whether children or pets were present with the idea that those with either might value trees more than residents who did not use their properties for child or pet recreation. The village's tree legislation requires that if a tree is removed, a new one must be planted. 44% of respondents had a tree removed in the past 3 years, and 55.6% had planted a new tree, indicating that these homeowners were adhering to the tree law.
Therefore, based on the demographic data that we have collected, we concluded that respondents were the most likely to have voted on the village's tree legislation, and in view of their following the law, might also be citizens who supported it. This was further supported by the 38% who reported that an arborist had evaluated the trees on their property within the past 3 years. That data point generally corresponds for 44% who had removed trees. 78 of the respondents who had trees removed did so because their trees were dead, diseased, blocked light, or had roots that might cause structural damage. There were no respondents who removed trees for reasons such as clearing a lot, obstructing a view, or issues of flaking.
83% reported that they care about future environmental impact of the species of trees on their properties, and 94% said that they were aware of the 2021 tree law. Only 16% said that they would replace an existing tree with an ornamental tree rather than one that provides an environmental advantage. When it came to assessing summer temperatures, air quality, floods, and property values, 100% of respondents said that these issues are very important, a total of 72.2%, or important, which totaled 27.8%.
Finally, 100% of respondents supported a variety of reasons for preserving the urban forest, including shade, privacy, attractiveness, and flood protection, with 55.6% voicing concerns about falling branches, roots interfering with foundations, or reducing open space.
Our data and analysis suggests that it is likely that the tree survey respondents are civically engaged, supported the tree law, and understand the value that trees bring to our community. Since the e-newsletter is available to all residents, the small number of respondents might mean that many local residents are not responsive to surveys and slash the immediate communication from the village to Mamaroneck via e-newsletters. We concluded that if the tree committee wishes to expand active interest in the village's preservation of the urban forest, it will be necessary to find alternative ways of canvassing residents to engage them in the aims of the tree conservation.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Action Research, and all of the presenters for an absolutely fascinating evening and such wide variety and depth in your work that you're doing. I'm so proud of you. I would like to thank Zoe for being a great host, and Steve Bavaro, who is running the live stream. We really appreciate the work you do, and we couldn't do this without you. So thank you, Steve Bavaro. And thank you to the audience for taking the time to listen to these wonderful students. I think that if you have any doubts about the future and you think about these leaders, you'll calm down. As you know, this is my final week at Rhinebeck after 20 years of producing this program. I want to thank successive administrators and boards of education for their support and the opportunity to make the Independent Learner Program integral to the Rhinebeck experience. Many of you have asked how to reach me after this Thursday, April 7th, and I want to assure you that I am easily available on Google and LinkedIn. And I'm also happy to announce that I'll be working with LMC Media, so please look out for my new show, Education Today. And with that, I want to say good night and thank you to all of our presenters again. And it's been a great evening.